By the time we find Acts chapter 16, Luke, the author of Acts, has joined Paul as a fellow traveler. Paul and Silas have traveled a great distance from Israel through modern-day Turkey and are on the verge of crossing over to European territory for the very first time. Timothy is also a part of the group as the Christian missionaries traveled a short distance from Troas in Turkey to Neapolis in Greece. From Neapolis, it was a short journey through the Macedonian hills to the leading city of the area, Philippi. This was a city populated in large part by retired Roman soldiers. It was also on the continent's best paved roadway, the Egnatia.
When Paul and Silas first landed in Europe, they would have come about a day's walk from the seacoast to a place called Philippi. And the size of this stadium behind me gives us an indication that this city was no small village. A lot of people lived in Philippi when Paul and Silas arrived. For a while, things went wonderfully well in Philippi. Paul and Silas had a nice life there. They had a quiet ministry. They met a woman named Lydia. Lydia had some friends, and the Bible tells us there came a point where Lydia became a believer, and she was baptized. There's a river that still runs very close to the ruins of Philippi today, and tradition says it was here that Lydia became the first baptized convert in all of Europe.
As a small, brand-new Christian church sprang up in Lydia's home, Paul and the other men quietly went about their work. But in a single day, their quiet ministry exploded into a painful and unforgettable confrontation. On their way to prayer, Paul called on the name of Jesus and healed a girl who was possessed of an evil spirit. Her owners had been using this young slave as a profitable fortune teller of sorts, and they had Paul and Silas arrested. A crowd gathered, and the city leaders ordered the two newcomers stripped of their clothes, beaten severely with rods, and thrown into prison. By the time they woke up from the flogging, their feet were in stocks, they were in a dungeon, and their bodies were racked with pain. It was unfair treatment. Paul and Silas had done nothing wrong. They were Roman citizens even, and had not received the fair trial due them. So how did they respond spiritually to a God who allowed them to be humiliated, beaten, and treated so poorly? The next words of the story are some of the most amazing in all the Bible. For about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Now the rest of the story involves a miraculous earthquake, the conversion of the jailer and his family, and an exit for the missionaries, who then headed for nearby Thessaloniki. But it was the song in the middle of such a dark night that stuck in the memory of all who heard the story. After such a terrible day, they would sing praises to the God who allowed them to suffer? It was a contrast of incredible proportions. Their circumstances were terrible, their God had allowed them to suffer, but their reaction gave the impression to those who watched them that their God was good and powerful and worthy of praise. If there's a single reason why the church in Philippi and in all of Greece grew so fast, perhaps it's because of the one night when two men who could have been excused for complaining chose to sing.
You know, I come to think about it here in the streets of Philippi. If Paul and Silas had never suffered for their faith here, then all Christianity would have been to the people here would be another philosophical belief system, another religion, maybe a few baptisms down at the river. But because Paul and Silas suffered so greatly, people knew that these two men were able to sing at midnight before the miraculous earthquake would come, and people here wanted to know what these two guys had. Christianity was transformed from a strange set of beliefs to a powerful life-changing truth because of the suffering that Paul and Silas had. You know, years later, Paul would write the Philippians a letter, and in it he would say, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say, rejoice." And they never doubted that he meant what he said. By the time Paul and Silas left Philippi, they must have wondered why God had ever let them come here in the first place. After all, they had been arrested, beaten, thrown into prison. It was a miserable experience in a way, but you see, maybe that was part of God's plan. Because once the people saw Paul and Silas suffer and sing at midnight in the prison, They understood that this Christianity, this talk of a person named Jesus, was more than a new philosophy, certainly more than another religious option. This was a power that could change a person's life. And they would never forget the day that Paul and Silas arrived here with a truth that changed an entire continent.